and Technology, grade 6. Grade 6. So today we want to discuss blood vessels. So the other time we were discussing the human circulatory system. So today we want to discuss still part of the human circulatory system, but we want to talk about the blood vessels, types of blood vessels, types of blood vessels. Now, in the human circulatory system, there are three types of blood vessels. There are three main types of blood vessels. So the first one is what we call the arteries. We have arteries. Number two, we have the veins. And number three, we have the capillaries. Now, these are the three main types of blood vessels that we have in the human circulatory system. Now, we want to look at the characteristics of these three different types of blood vessels, and their characteristics, and maybe the structure, how they look like. And we are going to start with the first one, the arteries. So let me start with the arteries. Number one, arteries. Now, arteries, the characteristics of arteries, these three blood vessels have different characteristics, or they perform different functions. So when we talk about arteries, number one characteristics of arteries is that they carry blood away from the heart. That is number one. So we talk about they carry blood away from the heart. So when we are looking at the structure of the heart, we talked about those blood vessels that carry blood away from the heart, and that is pulmonary artery and the aorta. So aorta as the main artery. So they carry, all of them carry blood out of the heart. The pulmonary artery carry blood from the heart to the lungs. The aorta carries blood from the heart to all parts of the body. So that is the first characteristics. So they carry blood away from the heart. Number two, they have thick walls. They have thick walls. Now, being that they carry blood away from the heart, and we realize that the heart is the pump that pumps blood to all parts of the body. So that means a pump, when it is pumping that blood, there is some pressure that accompanies the blood. It is the pressure that makes the blood to flow from this point to this point. So because of that pressure, these arteries must have thick walls to withstand that pressure, so that in case of they cannot burst in case the pressure is high. So that's the reason why they have thick walls. So they have thick walls because the blood that flows in arteries are under high pressure. Another characteristics, all arteries carry blood rich in oxygen, except, so all arteries carry oxygenated blood. Oxygenated blood. That means blood with oxygen, except, so there is this word except. So that word except means not all of them. So a good number of them carry oxygenated blood, except pulmonary artery. Except pulmonary artery. And remember, pulmonary artery carry deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs. So all arteries carry oxygenated blood except pulmonary artery. So sometimes when you are asked to get the, maybe state the characteristics of arteries, don't just say all arteries carry oxygenated blood, then full stop. No, not all of them. There is this one, pulmonary artery, that carries deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs. Number next, another characteristic. So aorta is the main artery. Aorta is the main artery. Aorta is the main artery. Why is it called the main artery? It is called the main artery because it carries the largest amount of blood. Remember, even in a water system where you have to supply water from using pipes, there's what we call the main pipe. So from the main pipe, there are some small pipes that gets out of that main pipe. So aorta is like a main pipe, so that from that main pipe we have some small pipes. So it carries a lot of blood. So aorta is the main artery, and therefore the reason why it is called the main artery is that it carries the largest amount of blood. Let us look at now. Remember, pulmonary artery carries blood from the heart to the lungs. Now, let us look at the structure. Sometimes examiners like drawing these blood vessels, and you are asked, which one is this? So, looking at these characteristics, we can have the structure of the artery. So, the structure of artery looks like this. So, we will have that, and we will have that. So, we talked about they have thick walls. Thick walls is this part here. Look at how thick it is, so that the remaining part, this is where the blood follows. So that is where the blood follows. So it has a thick wall. So this is the thick wall, this part here. So we call this part thick wall. Then this small hole here, that is called the lumen. So we talk about the arteries have what we call narrow lumen. So this one we can talk about narrow lumen. Narrow lumen. So this is how you can identify the what? The arteries. When they are drawn, so there is only this part where the blood flows. This part. So the whole of this is a wall, this is also a wall, so that is only a small space remaining. That small space is what we call the lumen. So they have narrow lumen, but the walls are thick. The reason why the walls are thick, to Mesema, we have said, is to withstand the pressure. So this is a structure of the what? Of the arteries. Number 2, veins. Veins. Let's look at veins. So number 2, we have veins. Characteristics number 1 is that veins carry blood to the heart. So these ones bring blood to the heart. Talk about they carry blood to the heart. So this brings blood into the heart. We have the 2 veins, like the pulmonary vein. Pulmonary vein brings the blood from the lungs to the heart. Then we have the vena cava, that also bring blood from all parts of the body to the heart. So the 2 brings blood to the heart. So that's the first characteristics, that all veins bring blood to the heart. Then these ones have thinner walls. They have thinner walls. Why do they have thinner walls? The blood that flows in veins does not have pressure because they are not from the heart. The heart is the only pump that pumps blood. So when the blood is coming from all parts of the body, there is no pressure that is bringing it in. And therefore, they don't need to have a thick walls because there is no pressure. So for them, they have thinner walls. And you can also say they have what is called valves. they have valves. Of course, the work of these valves is to prevent the backflow, prevent the backflow of blood, the backflow of blood. Being that the blood that flows in veins does not have pressure, there is nothing pumping it, there's a possibility it might fail. So if it fails and tries to go back, then there are these things that are called valves. They close. So once they close, they prevent that blood from flowing back. So that's the only thing that helps the veins. Another characteristic of the veins is that um, all veins carry blood without oxygen. All veins carry deoxygenated blood. Deoxygenated blood. Except, that means not all of them, except pulmonary vein. Pulmonary vein. Remember, pulmonary vein carries blood from the lungs to the heart. From the lungs. That means blood that is from the lungs, that means it has been oxidized. So it has oxygen. So it is not a deoxygenated blood. So all arteries, all veins carry deoxygenated blood except pulmonary vein, which carries oxygenated blood from the lungs to the heart. Another thing, vena cava is the main vein. Vena cava is the main vein. Why do we call it the main vein? Just the way we said artery, aorta is the main artery because it carries a lot of blood to all parts of the body. So that blood that went to all parts of the body will still come, the way that amount will still come back to the heart through the vena cava. So the same volume. So that's why now this one is also referred to as the main vein because it also carries the largest amount of blood. So the two, the aorta being the main artery and the vena cava being the main vein. Now, let us look at now the structure, the difference, and I want you to look at the difference between these two diagrams. So there was the artery which we drew, and now let us look at the vein. Vein, you might have the same size, but now the walls must be thinner. So this is now the walls. These are now what we call thin walls or thinner walls. So that means for them, they have thinner walls. So this is what we call the thinner walls or thin walls. Then for them, this one, for the arteries, this was narrow. This one is now wider lumen. And I hope now you can see the differences. Then for the veins, they will have to, they have valves. So we have to introduce to indicate those valves. Valves are this. So these are what prevents, so that when the blood flows like this and it tries to come back, then these valves will close. So they will prevent that blood from flowing back. So these are what we call valves. In the human body, there are only two places where we find valves. And get that one very clear, because one day you will be asked, how many places in the human body do we get valves? Valves are only found in veins and in the heart only. Even the heart have valves. So valves are only found in the veins and in the valves. So that is the structure of the vein. So this is the thin wall. The thin wall. Then now let us look at the what? The capillaries. The capillaries as the third blood vessel. The capillaries. Capillaries. So the third one is the capillaries. Now, the first thing you have to know, these are the smallest blood vessels. They are the smallest blood vessel. They are very small. Another thing, they are found on the surface of the body tissues. So they connect the arteries and the veins. They connect the arteries and the veins. Now, this is what connects the two main blood vessels, the arteries and the veins. So they are being connected by the capillaries. They facilitate the exchange of materials. These are the blood vessels that makes materials to move in our body from one point to another. So we talk about they facilitate the exchange of materials. They facilitate the exchange of materials. They facilitate the exchange of materials in our bodies. So they facilitate the exchange of materials in our bodies. Those materials can be oxygen, nutrients between the blood vessels. Now, maybe a capillary, when it is drawn, it is a single cell. So it will just be drawn like this. It might be drawn like this, or even if they decide to put a double layer, it will not have the vein. So that can be the easiest way of identifying between between the capillary and the vein. So this one doesn't have valves. So they will not, it will just be drawn like that. Even if it is double layered, but it is always a single cell. It is a single cell. So even if it is drawn as a double layer to confuse the learner, they will not draw the valves. The valves will not be here. So this is a capillary. So we have said that they join the veins and the arteries. So this is, if we have the vein like this, remember veins and maybe artery this side. So this is how it joins them. So we'll have of course, this one is now there. This is the artery, and this is the vein. So this is the vein, and this is an artery. So what joins them here is the capillary. This is what we mean by this statement. They connect the arteries and the veins. So those are our main three blood vessels, the main three blood vessels that we have in the human circulatory system. Now, let me look at the last bit of this, components of blood. Components of blood. Components of blood. So after looking at the types of blood vessels, let us look at components of blood. Components of blood. Components of blood. Now, the blood that we find in our body, inside the blood, there are different components. There are different components, and there are four main components of blood. So the first one, we have what is called the plasma. The plasma as a component of blood. Number two, we have the red blood cells. The red blood cells as a component of blood. Number three, we have the white blood cells. Then the fourth one, we have what we call the platelets. Now, these four components of blood perform different functions in our bodies. So the four components of blood performs different functions in our bodies, and that is what you want to look at. The functions of the four different components of blood. So let's start with the first one, the plasma. What is the function of the plasma in our body? Now, first, the plasma is the liquid part of the blood. It is the liquid part of the blood. That is number one about the plasma. So when you are bleeding, the first thing that comes out is that liquid. The liquid, that liquid is what we call the plasma. Now, this plasma, the main work of the plasma is that it is a means of transport. So we talk about transports, and because it transports different things, we have to list and very specific things that this thing does. So one, it transports digested food. That is number one. What this thing is transporting in our body? Digested food. That is the first function of the plasma. It transports digested food. This plasma also transports heat throughout our body. It transports heat. Another thing that this thing transports is waste products. Waste products. And when we talk about waste products, we talk about things like the urine, the carbon dioxide, all those. So waste products here include, you can talk about urine, you can talk about carbon dioxide, all those falls under waste. So any waste from our body is being transported by the plasma. Now, we cannot draw plasma because it is the liquid part of the blood. So we cannot draw the liquid. So number two is what we call the red blood cell. Red blood cell. So that's our number two, red blood cell. So red blood cells, they are small, round, and biconcave. That's number one. They are small, round, and biconcave. Biconcave means it's a circular thing. Then it has something like a hole, though not a hole. It's something that looks like this. It looks like donut. That's the shape of the red blood cells. So they are round. Now, this red blood cells is what gives the blood its red color. So when you bleed, what you are seeing there is the hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the red pigment that gives blood its red color. So that hemoglobin combines with red blood cells to transport oxygen. Now, when we talk about transportation, the plasma does not transport oxygen. That one must be very clear. Plasma transports carbon dioxide, not oxygen. Oxygen is transported by red blood cells. So we talk about transports oxygen. So don't say the work of the plasma is to transport everything. It transports many things, except oxygen. That is being transported by the red blood cells by the help of hemoglobin together with the red blood cells. So that is the work of the red blood cells. It transports it transports oxygen. That is the main function. So this is the structure. This is how it looks like. So I want to write number 3 here, the white blood cells, so that you see the difference, especially in their structure. White blood cells. Now, white blood cells, this is what maintains the body's immunity. So their main work is to fight disease-causing germs. Fight disease-causing germs. That means they are responsible for our immunity. The immunity of the body purely depends on our white blood cells. So the more the white blood cells you have, the more your body is strong enough to fight the disease-causing germs. Now, the difference between the white blood cells and the red blood cells, especially in terms of diagram, when they are drawn, the white blood cells are shapeless. They are irregular in shape. They don't have a specific shape. That is number one. They are irregular. They don't have specific shape. Number two, they have what we call nucleus. And that nucleus can be any point, at any point of that, they have nucleus. So this one is a nucleus. The white blood cells have a nucleus. The red blood cells does not. So this, don't say this is a nucleus. This is not a nucleus. I was just trying to give the shading that it looks like donut. This other part is thicker than the middle part, but this is not. So this one has a nucleus. This one does not have. So that is a very major difference. Now, in terms of diagrams, when they are drawn, red blood cells are round without nucleus. White blood cells are shapeless. They are irregular in shape, but they have a nucleus there. So that's why I wanted to have the two diagrams at the same page, so that now we can look at the last component of blood, that is the platelets. Platelets as the fourth component of blood. Platelets. These are the smallest. They are very small. Colorless. They help in blood clotting. That is the main function. They help in blood clotting. What do we mean by this? Now, blood clotting means if you get injured or if you injure yourself, then the blood starts coming out and you just leave it without touching it. After a few minutes, you will see that blood trying to dry up and form some coat. Some coat. Of course, that blood will try to dry up and form some coat. And if you happen to remove that coat that has been formed, it starts bleeding again. So that coat that has been formed is what we refer to as clotting. It clots, it makes the blood to clot, to prevent. So this one prevents excess bleeding. A very important component of blood. This is what makes our body stop bleeding in case of an injury, so that you don't bleed excessively. Remember, bleeding excessively means you lose a lot of blood from your body. And once you lose a lot of blood, that means you are likely to suffer either from anemia or even lack of blood has caused death to some people. So a very important component of blood, the platelets, their main work is to help in blood clotting. So anytime you get injured, they come very fast and start clotting, start making that place to dry up so that the bleeding can stop. So that is the work of the platelets, and they're small. They are very small blood components. Now, up to there, that brings us to the end of the blood vessels and the component of blood put together. So that brings us to the end of our today's lesson. And as always, please subscribe to our channel, share, and let us share ideas. Education is